No one saw it coming. The sky was clear that morning. People were getting ready for work. Children were getting ready for school. Mothers kissed their babies. Fathers packed lunches, and the world moved with its usual noise. But then the noise stopped. The birds flew away as if they knew something was about to happen. The dogs started barking at the sky, and the wind became still like it was holding its breath. A strange hum filled the air, like a deep vibration running through the bones of the earth. People looked up and saw the clouds parting in perfect circles. The blue sky turned silver as giant shadows moved across cities and seas and mountains and deserts, dark shapes like wounds against the morning light. And then the beams came down, soft and bright and blinding. People thought it was sunlight. People thought it was something beautiful. People thought they were safe, until the screaming started as women began to rise into the air, lifted gently at first as if held by invisible hands. Mothers in kitchens were lifted through rooftops. Daughters were pulled from playgrounds. Sisters were torn from streets. As the world watched, unable to move, unable to speak, unable to understand, fathers tried to grab them, but the light burned cold against their hands. Children tried to pull their mothers down, but the light pulled harder. The news channels cut through the panic, broadcasting the horror in every language, the camera shaking as they captured the women rising into the sky, some reaching out with terrified eyes, some holding their children until the last second, some whispering goodbye as the beams carried them into the shadows above. The light was everywhere, over villages, over cities, over remote farms and packed slums, over skyscrapers and open fields. The light took them all, without hesitation, and in those moments the world felt smaller, the world felt empty, and all that was left was silence, broken by the sounds of fathers falling to their knees, clutching pieces of clothing dropped from the sky, a single shoe, a single earring, a single scarf that smelled like home. The world governments scrambled to respond. Jets scrambled to the sky, but the shadows moved higher, and the lights stayed out of reach. The missiles fired, but the ships did not move. The bullets flew, but nothing fell from the sky, and all the while the lights kept pulling until 99 million women had vanished into the dark, leaving the world in a cold dawn. The screams turned into sobs. The sobs turned into silence, and then the silence turned into anger. People demanded answers. People demanded revenge. People demanded their mothers and daughters and sisters and wives back. But the sky was empty again. The shadows were gone, and the lights had disappeared. The world was left in ruins of the heart, and in that silence, deep in the streets of broken cities, a man known as Baba Yaga opened his eyes in the darkness and listened to the whispers of the missing. He heard every cry, every promise, every vow for vengeance, and he stood up without a word, while far away in a burned-out shelter Agent Norris cleaned the last picture of his family with a trembling hand and loaded his plasma revolvers with a steady breath, because in the silence that followed the world began to remember what it meant to fight back. The world was not the same after the women were taken. The streets were quiet, but the quiet was not peaceful. It was heavy. It was the kind of quiet that made people afraid to sleep, afraid to dream, afraid to wake up to another day without them. The fathers moved like ghosts through empty kitchens. The children stared at empty seats at the table. The air smelled like burned coffee and cold ashes as the world tried to pretend that life could continue. The schools were half empty, the hospitals were half empty, the offices were half empty, but the grief was full everywhere. It seeped through the cracks in the walls, and in the hearts of the people who were left behind. They gathered in streets, with candles and pictures of the women they lost, holding them high to the sky, as if the sky would give them back. The government spoke on every channel, telling the people to stay calm, telling the people to trust them, telling the people they were working on a solution, but the people did not believe them anymore. The people looked at the sky with anger in their hearts. They looked at the stars with tears in their eyes. They looked at each other and saw the same questions written in every tired face. What are we going to do? Who is going to bring them back? How do we fight an enemy we cannot even see? And in the middle of this hopelessness, there were whispers. Whispers about a man who had returned from the places no one else could go. Whispers about a man who once was a ghost himself. Whispers about a man who did not fear the empire. They called him Baba Yaga. They said he was already dead once. They said he walked through fire and darkness and came back without a sound. They said he could find them. They said he would bring them back. Some called him a myth. Some called him a madman. Some called him the last hope of the earth. While far away in a city that was now nothing but rubble, a man named Agent Norris listened to these whispers. He listened as he cleaned the barrels of his revolvers. He listened as he checked the edges of his knives. He listened as he loaded the last round into his belt. Agent Norris was a soldier who had seen too Many wars, he had lost too many friends, he had buried too many bodies, he had burned too many memories, but he had never lost his daughter and his wife until now, and now he had nothing left to lose. He stood in front of a cracked mirror looking into the eyes of a man he barely recognized anymore, the eyes of a man who would burn the world to bring them back, the eyes of a man who was ready to die. If it meant the women could live, he walked through the empty streets, past the collapsed towers, past the burned cars, past the places that once held laughter and now only held the echoes of what was lost. He was looking for Baba Yaga. He was looking for a ghost because the world needed a ghost to fight the shadows that took their women, and in the dark corners of the city, where the lights no longer worked, Agent Norris found him, a man sitting in the dark, sharpening a blade that glowed like the last light of the dying sun. Baba Yaga looked up with eyes that saw through every lie, every fear, every promise, and in that silence, without a single word, they knew what they had to do. They would go into the sky, they would follow the shadows, they would bring them back, or they would turn the empire to ashes. The night was cold when Baba Yaga and Agent Norris left the city behind, moving like shadows through the empty roads, past burned cars and shattered glass, past walls covered with the faces of missing women, past the silent streets where the wind whispered the names of those who were taken. They did not speak as they walked. They did not need to speak. They knew the mission. They knew the cost. They knew the promise they made to themselves and to the world, the promise that they would bring them back or they would die trying. Baba Yaga carried a blade that hummed softly in the dark, a blade that once belonged to a fallen empire, a blade that had tasted the blood of monsters. Agent Norris carried 2 plasma revolvers strapped to his chest, each one loaded with the last hopes of fathers and sons and children who cried at night for their mothers. They reached the edge of the city, where the black fields stretched under the silver moonlight, and there in the darkness, hidden under tarps and broken metal, was the ship. It was small, stolen from the Empire during the chaos when they first arrived, but it was fast, and it was angry, and it was ready for war. Baba Yaga checked the engines while Agent Norris loaded the last crates of ammo and rations. They moved with the silence of men who had nothing left to fear, the silence of men who had seen the worst the universe could offer, and still chose to fight, the silence of men who carried the weight of 99 million souls on their backs. The engines roared to life, shaking the ground as the blue light ignited beneath the hull. The fields around them lit up with fire as the ship lifted from the earth, and for a moment, it was like the world was holding its breath, watching them leave, watching them rise, watching them disappear into the black sky. The clouds broke around them as they passed through the atmosphere. The stars opened up like wounds in the dark. The earth fell away. Below them, a quiet blue sphere that looked so small, so fragile from up here. Baba Yaga sat in the cockpit staring at the navigation screen, the coordinates flashing. In front of him, the data stolen from the Empire, showing the path to the motherships, the places where the women were held, where the Empire kept them like treasures in the dark. Agent Norris checked the weapons systems, the shields, the engines, every part of the ship, every bolt, every wire, because up there in the cold silence of space, there would be no second chances, there would be no mercy for mistakes. They passed the orbiting wreckage of old satellites, the broken bones of human ambition, floating forever in the cold. They passed the abandoned stations, where no lights burned anymore. They moved past the last lights of Earth into the true darkness, where the Empire lived. The scanners lit up red shapes in the distance, massive shadows moving in the void like leviathans in the deep. The motherships, they were there waiting silent, watching the ships load as they approached the shadows, weapons ready, engines humming, lights dimming, as they prepared for the assault inside the ship. Baba Yaga closed his eyes for a moment, and in that silence he saw the faces of the women, the faces of the mothers, the daughters, the sisters. He opened his eyes and whispered without a sound, "We are coming." The ship moved through the shadows of the Empire motherships like a phantom, slipping between the patrols and the scanning lights. The silence inside the ship was thick like the dark around them. Baba Yaga sat with his eyes open, but his mind was elsewhere, remembering the faces of the women he saw in his dreams, the cries of the children he heard every night in the streets. Agent Norris checked his revolvers again, feeling the weight of the metal, the hum of the plasma ready to burn through anything that stood between him and the women he loved. The radar flickered, showing the movement of Empire drones, black insect shapes crawling across the void, their lights blinking cold and blue as they searched for intruders. But the ship was small, and the ship was angry, and the ship knew how to hide in the dark. The mothership was close, now, its surface a black mountain in the stars. covered in red veins of light that pulsed like the heartbeat of a monster. The docking bays opened like hungry mouths waiting to swallow the ship, but Baba Yaga and Agent Norris did not fear the mouth of the monster. They were the storm inside the silence. They moved closer, engines cutting off as they drifted into the bay, the magnetic locks pulling the ship into place. The lights inside the bay turned red, alarms flashing, as the Empire realized too late what was coming. The ramp dropped and Baba Yaga moved first, the blade in his hand glowing with quiet fury as he stepped into the red light. Agent Norris followed, the revolvers rising with calm precision. As they moved through the chaos, the Empire soldiers ran forward, their weapons firing streams of blue light, but Baba Yaga moved like smoke, the blade slicing through armor and sparks dancing in the air as the soldiers fell. Agent Norris covered him, each shot finding its mark, each step bringing them closer to the core of the mothership where the women were kept. They moved through corridors lined with black metal and red lights, the walls shaking as the alarms screamed. The Empire sent machines to stop them, machines that crawled on the walls and sealing machines that fired cold beams that burned through steel. But Baba Yaga cut them down piece by piece, and Agent Norris shattered them with his shots, leaving the corridors littered with burning wreckage. They reached the inner chamber, massive doors covered in strange symbols, pulsing with red light. Baba Yaga placed his hand on the door, feeling the cold, the memories of all the women who were taken behind this wall. Agent Norris looked at him, nodding once as he reloaded the last of his rounds. Baba Yaga took a breath, and the blade came down, cutting through the locks, sparks flying as the metal screamed. The doors opened and the light poured out, a soft blue light that filled the dark corridor, and in that light they saw them, rows and rows of chambers, each holding a woman suspended in the glow, eyes closed like they were dreaming, hands floating in the soft blue like flowers in water. Baba Yaga stepped forward, reaching out to touch the glass, and the eyes of the women began to open one by one, waking up to the sound of freedom. Waking up to the promise that they were not forgotten, waking up to the promise that humanity had come for them. The eyes of the women opened slowly, blinking against the soft blue light as the memories of what happened came back to them, the fear, the confusion, the cold touch of the machines that took them from their homes and families, the pain of being trapped in the chambers, unable to move, unable to scream, unable to know if anyone was coming for them. And now, in front of them, stood Baba Yaga and Agent Norris, two figures covered in ash and sparks, with eyes that burned with promise and fury. Baba Yaga moved to the first chamber, pressing his hand against the glass, feeling the heartbeat of the woman inside. She was young, her eyes wide as she looked at him, her hands pressed against the glass from the inside. She did not speak, but her eyes asked the question that all of them asked: are we going home? Agent Norris moved to the control panel, wires sparking under his hands as he tore them open, forcing the system to obey him. His fingers moved quickly as alarms screamed above them, and red lights pulsed like the heartbeat of the Empire. Soldiers were coming, machines were coming. The Empire was waking up to the theft of its stolen treasure, but Baba Yaga did not care. Agent Norris did not care. They only cared about the promise they made. The chambers hissed as they opened, blue mist pouring out like ghosts returning to the world. The women fell forward into the arms of Baba Yaga, into the steady hands of Agent Norris. One by one, they woke and breathed and realized they were alive. They were safe. They were being rescued. The noise in the corridors grew louder, the sound of metal feet, the cold hum of Empire rifles charging the shadows. Moving closer to stop them, Baba Yaga handed the young woman to Agent Norris, who nodded and guided her toward the ship. As Baba Yaga turned to face the darkness, his blade lifted slowly, the light along the edge like the last sunrise of a dying world. The first of the machines came crawling on the walls, their eyes cold blue and weapons ready, but Baba Yaga moved with the silence of a promise, kept the blade cut through steel, the sparks falling like rain. The machines screamed in their cold voices as they fell. The women moved in a line, guided by Agent Norris, who covered them with precise shots, each shot dropping an enemy each step, bringing the women closer to the ship, closer to freedom, closer to the sky that had once betrayed them, but was now waiting to take them home. Baba Yaga moved through the smoke and sparks, cutting down the last of the machines, his eyes never leaving the women as they passed him, each face a reminder of why he was here, each tear a promise that he would see this through. The last chamber opened, and the last woman fell into his arms. She looked at him with eyes full of fear and hope, and he nodded once, as if to say, "You are safe now." The ship engines roared to life as the women were loaded inside, their faces turned toward the dark corridors where Baba Yaga stood waiting. As Agent Norris reached out a hand and called to him. It was time to leave. It was time to finish what they started. It was time to take them home. The engines of the ship roared louder, shaking the metal around them as the women were guided inside, their eyes wide with fear and hope. As they clung to each other, whispering the names of the children and families they prayed were still waiting for them outside in the dark corridor, Baba Yaga stood with the blade hanging at his side, his breath slow as he listened to the sounds of the Empire coming closer, the stomping of steel boots, the cold hum of the weapons ready to burn them down, the voices of the Empire soldiers speaking in a language that was meant to sound like power, but to Baba Yaga, it only sounded like fear. Agent Norris stepped out of the ship, his revolvers reloaded and ready, his eyes locking with Baba Yaga for a moment, and in that moment no words were needed. They both knew that if they did not hold the line here, the women would never see the earth again. The ship would never leave, the Empire would crush them, and the promise they made would be broken. Baba Yaga lifted the blade slowly as the shadows moved closer, the red lights of the alarms painting the metal walls in blood. The first of the soldiers came into view, black armor, cold eyes, rifles aimed, but Baba Yaga moved first, faster than the shadows, faster than the fear. The blade cut through the rifles, cut through the armor, cut through the darkness. Sparks and screams filled the air. As the soldiers fell one by one, Agent Norris fired his revolvers. Each shot a promise, each shot a memory of the family he was fighting for, the recoil of the gun steady in his hands as he moved with the calm of a man who had nothing left to lose. The women inside the ship watched with tears in their eyes as the two men fought for them, fought for their freedom, fought for the hope that had been stolen from them. The corridor filled with smoke, the red lights flashing through the haze as the last of the Empire soldiers fell to the ground, leaving only silence and the sound of the ship engines shaking the air. Agent Norris turned to Baba Yaga, nodding once, as if to say, "It is done." Baba Yaga looked back at the bodies on the floor, the blood, the sparks, the broken weapons, and he knew it was not done, not yet, but it was enough for now. They turned and walked back to the ship, the blade still glowing in Baba Yaga's hand, the revolver still smoking in Agent Norris's grip. The ramp lifted as they stepped inside. The women moved back, giving them space, but their eyes were full of gratitude, full of questions, full of fear of what came next. Baba Yaga moved to the controls, his hands steady as he guided the ship out of the docking bay, the walls shaking around them as the alarms screamed. The Empire was waking up, the Empire was angry, and the Empire was coming for them. But Baba Yaga and Agent Norris did not care. The ship broke through the outer doors into the cold black of space, the stars opening before them. As the engines roared to life, the motherships turned their weapons ready to tear them apart, but Baba Yaga pushed the engines harder, and the ship screamed as it leaped forward faster and faster, leaving the Empire ships behind as lights turned to streaks and the darkness swallowed them whole, carrying them toward home, carrying them toward the earth, carrying them toward the promise they made. The ship moved through the black of space, leaving behind the broken pieces of the Empire ships that tried to stop them. The engines burned bright in the darkness, pushing them faster and faster toward the blue glow of Earth. The women sat quietly in the hold, some holding each other, some looking at the stars through the small windows, some whispering prayers to the families they hoped would still be waiting for them. Baba Yaga sat at the controls, his eyes steady on the path ahead, the stars moving like rivers of light around them, the blade resting across his knees, humming softly, as if it too was waiting for what came next. Agent Norris moved through the rows of women, checking the restraints, checking the supplies, checking the engines, and the power cores. He looked at their faces, each one a reminder of why they had come, each one a reason to keep fighting no matter what was waiting for them. When they returned to Earth, the scanners beeped suddenly, the cold mechanical voice of the system warning them of movement behind them. The Empire was not done, the Empire was not finished, the Empire was coming for what it believed belonged to it. Baba Yaga looked at the screens, seeing the red blips appearing in the dark, the ships of the Empire fast and silent, moving to cut them off, to bring them back to the darkness, to take the women. Again, Agent Norris looked at Baba Yaga, and for a moment, there was silence. In that silence they heard the voices of the women, the voices of the families, the voices of the world that had cried out when the women were taken. They remembered the streets filled with candles, the children who waited by the doors every night, the fathers who woke up screaming from dreams that were too real. Baba Yaga pressed the controls, and the ship turned sharply, the engines roaring as they faced the darkness that was coming for them. The women held on to each other, their eyes wide, but they did not scream. They did not cry. They had been silent for too long, and now they were awake, now they were alive, now they were going home. The Empire ships opened fire, streams of cold blue light tearing through the dark, but Baba Yaga moved the ship like a shadow between the blasts, the shields flaring, with each hit but holding. As the engines burned hotter, the weapons systems came online, and Agent Norris moved to the guns, his hands steady as he aimed into the dark, and fired. The recoil shook the ship, but the shots found their marks, tearing into the Empire ships, breaking them apart one by one. In the silence of space, the explosions looked like flowers of fire blooming in the black, the debris drifting away like ashes. As the ship pushed forward faster and faster, the scanners showed fewer red blips now, fewer enemies, fewer obstacles between them and home. But Baba Yaga knew it was not over, not yet. The biggest shadow appeared on the scanner, a massive ship, dark and cold, its weapons charging its engines, burning with the fury of a dying empire. Baba Yaga tightened his grip on the controls. Agent Norris checked his revolvers. The women held each other, and in that moment, as the shadow grew larger in the windows, they all knew that the final battle was coming, the moment that would decide if they would see the Earth again, or if they would be lost to the darkness forever. The massive Empire ship moved in the darkness like a beast in the deep, its weapons charging its engines, glowing with a cold blue light that cut through the blackness of space. The scanners screamed as the ship locked onto them, preparing to unleash the full wrath of the Empire to reclaim what it believed was its property. Baba Yaga gripped the controls, his eyes locked on the shadow that filled the windows. The blade beside him humming, as if it could sense the final battle, was here. Agent Norris moved to the weapon systems, checking the power cells, checking the targeting systems, his mind clear, his breathing slow as he remembered the faces of the women who were behind him, the faces of the children who would be waiting for their mothers to return. The women held on to each other, their eyes reflecting the glow of the engines, the glow of the weapons, the glow of hope that refused to die. Even as the darkness closed in around them, the Empire ship fired beams of cold blue light cutting through the void like the breath of a monster. The ship shook as the shields took the hits, sparks falling from the ceiling as alarms screamed. But Baba Yaga did not stop. He pushed the engines harder, weaving through the beams, moving like a ghost between the blasts, the stars spinning around them as they danced with death in the cold silence. Agent Norris returned fire, the cannons roaring as they unleashed blasts of plasma into the darkness. The shots found their mark, tearing into the armor of the Empire ship, sending pieces of metal spinning away into the void. But the Empire ship was massive, its weapons relentless, its engines burning as it closed the distance, trying to swallow them whole. Baba Yaga pulled the ship into a dive, moving under the Empire ship, skimming its armored belly as the cannons fired again and again, explosions rippling across the surface of the beast. But still it moved, still it fired, still it hunted them. The women cried out as the ship shook, the lights flickering as the shields struggled to hold. Baba Yaga glanced back for a moment, seeing their faces, seeing the fear, seeing the hope, and in that moment he knew that no matter what happened, they could not let the Empire take them back. They could not let the darkness win. Agent Norris looked at Baba Yaga, and in that silent glance they made their choice. The scanners showed the weak point in the Empire ship, a glowing red mark near the engines, a place where the armor was thin, where the heart of the beast could be reached. Baba Yaga turned the ship engines, screaming as they climbed up the side of the Empire ship, dodging the blasts that rained down around them. Agent Norris charged the cannons one last time, the power cells glowing bright, the air crackling with heat. The moment stretched like the silence before a storm. The Empire ship turned its weapons to face them, preparing to end them in a single blast. But Baba Yaga held the course, the engines burning, the shields flaring as the cannons fired a single blast, a beam of pure light that cut through the darkness, cutting into the weak point of the Empire's ship, piercing the heart of the beast. There was a moment of silence before the explosion bloomed, a flower of fire that lit up the void as the Empire ship cracked and broke apart, drifting into the darkness as the pieces burned and the silence returned. The women stared out the windows, tears in their eyes, as the shadow of the Empire ship fell away behind them, and in that silence they knew they were going home. The shadow of the Empire ship burned behind them as the pieces drifted away into the darkness like ashes falling in the cold silence. The engines of their ship roared softly now, steady and strong, as they pushed forward toward the blue glow of Earth that was growing larger in the windows. The women watched the planet with tears in their eyes, their hands pressed against the glass as if they could already feel the warmth of the sun, the breeze of the wind, the voices of the children calling for them in the streets. Baba Yaga sat at the controls, the blade resting across his knees, the light along the edge calm. Now, as if it too was tired, as if it too knew that the battle was over, but the war would never truly end, Agent Norris moved through the rows of women, checking them, speaking softly, his voice calm and steady, as he promised them that they were almost home, that they were safe now, that no one would ever take them again. The scanners were clear, no more shadows, no more red lips, no more Empire ships hunting them in the darkness, just the quiet hum of the engines and the glow of the earth pulling them closer. The women began to sing, softly, voices shaking at first, then stronger, as the fear began to fade, as the hope began to grow, as the promise of the world they lost returned to them. Baba Yaga closed his eyes for a moment, hearing the song, feeling the weight of the blade, the memories of the screams, the memories of the cries, the memories of the faces of those who could not be saved. The engine lights flickered as they entered the orbit of Earth, the blue and green of the world filling the windows as the ship moved through the clouds. Breaking through the gray into the light of the sun, the women held each other, laughing, crying, some whispering prayers of thanks, some calling the names of their children, their families, their homes as the cities came into view. Below, Agent Norris moved to the window, looking down at the streets, at the people gathering. As the ship descended, the people looked up, pointing, shouting, crying as they saw the ship, saw the markings, saw the promise that was returning to them. The ship landed softly, the engines quieting as the ramp lowered, the light of the sun pouring into the hold. The women stood for a moment, frozen in the light, their eyes wide, their hands shaking as they looked at the world that had waited for them, the world that had never forgotten them. Baba Yaga stood at the ramp, the blade resting against his shoulder as he looked out at the families running forward, children breaking free from the crowd, screaming for their mothers, fathers dropping to their knees as they saw the faces of the women they thought they lost. Agent Norris stepped forward, helping the women down the ramp one by one, each step a promise, each tear a memory, each embrace a piece of the world being healed. The people gathered around the ramp, holding the women, holding each other, crying in the sunlight as the wind moved through the streets, carrying the voices of the people, the voices of the women, the voices of the children. Baba Yaga looked at the sky, the blue endless above him, the blade at his side as he closed his eyes for a moment, and in that moment he felt the world breathe. He felt the promise kept, he felt the war that would never end, but he also felt the hope that would never die.